Today, I want to talk about Cursor, this AI tool, and how it really made me think about convenience, choice, and a lot of what we do day to day in our work. And if you guys aren't familiar, I'm going to briefly talk about what Cursor actually is. This is the logo for Cursor, but essentially, Cursor is this AI chat tool, or it's an AI tool, and you have your code editor, right? You can, on this little panel, still write code like normal, but then a lot of this application is dedicated to this like AI chat where they frame you as a orchestrator, where you're like orchestrating the AI to write the code rather than you coding and then having the AI be like a co-pilot and autocomplete. It flips the paradigm a little bit. You're this orchestrator, like a manager. You're telling the AI what you want. Our company got us this Cursor application to try out and to see if it boosts productivity a lot. And also there's this phase of vibe coding where you're using AI very predominantly to create code output. I tried Cursor and I was really impressed. I tested it on this sample application and it was generating code that works very quickly. I think in general, Cursor made me much more productive, at least on this demo application. I was just really amazed, to be honest. It did make me feel and think about other things that necessarily weren't coding related. And that's why I wanted to talk about like convenience and choice. And I'll talk about convenience first, right? And what Cursor really improved, I would say, about like the coding experience. And basically it just lowered the amount of difficulty it took to write code that works. Imagine a scale of convenience from least convenient to most convenient. Just for a simple example about food, right? Most convenient type of food is probably like fast food and junk food. And then you have like takeout where you can get like DoorDash. It's very convenient and good food. On the other side, the least convenient way is growing vegetables, raising, butchering animals, and putting a meal together. Most of us aren't farmers. If you are, that's cool. But most of us buy groceries and cook. That's the least convenient way for us to make food. And then we do all the above. We get takeout, we eat fast food sometimes. And I think what AI and Cursor does is it's a convenient way to produce like code that works. A lot of times coding from scratch, like assembly is the least convenient and not many do it. You have like low level languages like C+ and Rust where it's like a little bit higher on the scale, but still pretty like inconvenient to do. And then on the other side, simpler languages like Python, JavaScript, and maybe using AI to vibe code and help you do that. But most of us probably fall on the scale of like maybe using Python and JavaScript and not AI, or lower level languages like Go to write applications. So we're still on the scale, but a lot of us are going more convenient way to write code where we're using Cursor and other AI tools. And so the reason I wanted to talk about it, because while I was using Cursor, while I found it like super impressive, the amount of code I could write, it made me feel like it wasn't the most enjoyable experience. And it made me think about like, why didn't I find this like super enjoyable? At first I was like, wow, this is so cool. I can produce code that works really quickly. But then I found it like when I was running into issues, a little bit frustrated. Also, I didn't feel maybe a strong of a connection with the code. And it just made me evaluate, like reflect, what did I like about the experience and what I didn't like about the experience of using AI tools that could help me with my work. Throughout two charts, first mapping reward versus difficulty, simplification. But I find the more difficult a task is, the more rewarding it is. If I order DoorDash and I get the food, I'm not proud of myself. But if I cooked a good meal from scratch, like going to the groceries, maybe making my own pasta with the flour and water, that is a really rewarding experience. So as things get more difficult, I generally find them more rewarding. It does taper off. There's a limiting factor where running 12 miles versus 13 miles, I don't necessarily get the same like bump in like feeling that was like super enjoyable as I do maybe like 2 to 3 miles. It's like, it's a scale. I would say the same thing about coding, right? When I can do something that's really difficult, right now I'm like trying to build a small video game and working with the game engine for the first time, I find really difficult, but I also find really rewarding versus something that maybe is less difficult, like building a very small React app. It's not as difficult for me right now, and I find it less rewarding. This is generally a good framework for how rewarding I feel work is. And also, when I think about difficulty versus output, it's a similar chart, right? In general, like the yellow line, this is how I normally code. Pre-AI, the more effort I put in, the more output I get. But there reaches a point where like me putting more and more effort, like toward here, it does taper off. Like you putting in more effort and doing harder and harder tasks is actually going to lead to less of a bump in output. If you're already a good runner, working harder will have less impact on your speed than if you're not a good runner. You start running like twice a week, you'll probably get massive gains, right? These newbie gains. I would say in general, this yellow line is also the difficulty to output. It aligns with my reward structures. The more work I do, if I find a job like medium difficulty, I can get medium output. I feel a medium amount of reward from how proud I am of that work and how rewarding I feel it is. But what I think AI has really done is made it easier to achieve a high level output. And you could be like not a coder or not a programmer at all, but just use prompts and you can still get good output, right? If a job is like not that difficult, you can use AI to get more and more output than before. From Cursor, I had minimal hands-on coding, just using prompts. I can get tons of boilerplate code. It can use like well-known NPM libraries like really well. I was able to get things done a lot faster. If you're doing things that are really hard, maybe AI is not there yet. I mean, it can do simpler tasks really well, but there's probably still like a limiting factor. That's why it gets to the same point. My reward structure never changes. If I do this level of difficulty, I might get a higher output, but I'm still only getting a medium level of reward. Before, that same output will correspond to doing a hard task. I'm expecting a high reward, but because it wasn't that hard, I'm actually getting like this level of reward. So it's just like a mismatch in, I would say, like how rewarding I feel it is based off output that I'm expecting. If I create this really complicated app, I'm expecting to feel like a high level of reward, but because it wasn't difficult, I feel a lower reward. And that's what I think with Cursor. I'm not using AI tools day to day, so I feel that mismatch in difficulty, but that might change as I use AI more. Basically, what it brings me to evaluate is like using Cursor, how I feel about it, using like AI tools. Because traditionally I code using NeoVim, where it's just the code. There's barely like any auto completion. There's a little bit of LSP where I can jump around the code and it does have some auto completion, but it's very bare bones. It's almost cooking from scratch in a way. Cursor is hitting the jets and using this powerful tool. It gets you high output, but it made me feel like how rewarding the work was slightly less than I do if I was to do it from scratch in Vim. I definitely want to use AI tools to achieve higher output for work. You may basically choose when you want to achieve high output, choose when you maybe want to feel like your hands on keyboard and finding a lot more rewarding, a lot more flow state. Basically, like AI tools, what I'm trying to say with Cursor is it forces you to choose when you want to achieve output and maybe less enjoyment, at least from coding hands on keyboard, versus when you just want to code for fun because you like it. You might not be achieving the highest output, but maybe you'll be achieving more enjoyment and more rewarding work from doing things from scratch. And of course, it's a balance. I think what I've experimented on now is using my traditional NeoVim to code even simple tasks. I just like coding, getting into that flow state. But when I get stuck, instead of opening ChatGPT, I'll open Cursor. Cursor is a lot more, it's built for coding, right? So it's a better experience there. And then after I solve my problem, maybe I'll close Cursor again and go back. Sometimes for work when I care more about output. So I think at the end of the day, and what this video is really about, is Cursor and AI tools really faces you to make choices based on if you feel like you want to achieve like maybe more enjoyment or have more hands-on work, or if you want to be super productive and using really convenient tools that make it easy to achieve output, maybe at the cost of whether you enjoy it, but it adds convenience, it adds output, but it's still just really important to make that choice for yourself and not get sucked into using AI tools all the time. It's something I've really thought about when it comes to using Cursor, and I'll continue to think about. So thanks for listening. Bye.